Welcome to the Dance Centre podcast. I am your host, Claire French, and I'm joining you from the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, also known as Vancouver, Canada. I'll be talking to dancers, choreographers and other members of the dance world here on the West Coast to find out more about their creative work and practices and to discuss what it means to us to be dance professionals today. Thanks for joining us. I'm delighted to be joined by Tomoyo Yamada, who is an interdisciplinary artist focusing on performance art and choreography. Born in Japan and educated in the United States, she spent most of her life traveling between North America and Japan, negotiating distinct cultural identities. Her practice is influenced by her ongoing research into identity politics and her self-reflexive interrogation of transnational cultural differences. Her primary training is in contemporary and modern dance, and she completed her MFA degree at Simon Fraser University School for the Contemporary Arts. Tomoyo has been presenting work in various festivals such as Dance Cafe, International Dance Day at the Dance Centre, Open Stage, Dancing on the Edge Festival, Vines Arts Festival, and Reverb Dance Festival. We will be talking about all of those things together, all of the projects that she's involved in, and all of the interdisciplinary collaborative works that Tomoyo is involved in. I also did my MFA at SFU a long, long time ago in 1997. And so we have that in common, which is really great, and maybe even a reason for us being in Vancouver, perhaps, but we will find out. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Tomoyo and her voice and ask her the question, when, how, and why did you start to dance?
Yes.
Hi.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to your podcast.
Pleasure.
Yes. I actually started dance when I was 3. And it wasn't really because I wanted to dance. It was because my mother knew that our family was going to be relocating to the States from Japan. And I did not have any English skills. The only language I spoke was Japanese. And being so little, my parents were worried that I wouldn't be able to communicate with any of the kids in the States. And they wanted me to have some sort of communication tool other than language to be able to connect with people in the States. And that's why my parents enrolled me into a ballet class, because they knew that ballet classes didn't really require a lot of verbal communication.
Wow. I feel like this is a drop the mic moment right there. I feel like you're just like, okay, and we're done. No, that's just wonderful. I have goosebumps. Yeah. Okay, please continue.
Yeah.
After that epic introduction.
Yes. And so that's how I got introduced into dance. And I think I moved to the States when I was like 3.5, just before 4 years old. And really, dance has been like a tool for communication for me since then. I never felt like I lacked any verbal communication skills in the States because I had dance and I had my dance friends around me all the time. Mm-hmm. And also, well, this is my mom's story. My dad says that he enrolled me into dance because he thought I needed to move a little bit more as a toddler because I just loved sleeping and eating and reading books. And he was a little worried that I was not developing the social skills. So that's my dad's side of the story, but I like to think that my mom's side of the story has a little bit more meaning to why I started dance.
Well, I don't think, and when you're so young, I think just having the support and that attention, and reasoning behind it is just really wonderful, because already there's a sense of, there's such authentic reasons to be child development, mm-hmm. to be in your holistic child development. So I think that's a big thing. We know that as dancers.
Yes.
But to think that it's a natural thing that all children have, mm-hmm. this is a really good perspective, that maybe it's not just a given that all children innately have this skill. It has to be something that's developed. And so that attention that your parents had on that is really quite wonderful. I want to just draw on what you said about then having all of your friends around you, your dance friends when
Mhm.
you did move to the States. Could you talk a little bit about that? You must have danced quite a lot for you to feel like, did you go to the States and go to a dance school? Like,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes. So we moved to Ohio, which is
Mm-hmm.
quite different from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also quite different from Vancouver. But I went to a school called Patty Pilley's School of Dance. And initially I started with just ballet, but I was really interested in tap dance, which is not really taught a lot in Japan.
Mm.
And so tap dance, jazz, and hip hop were the few kind of dance techniques that I started learning. And that led me into being a part of the competition team, the competitive
Mm-hmm.
dance team. But I was still quite little. I only lived in the States until I was like 11, 10, 11.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was in the competitive team until then, and that was where I made most of my friends. We were dancing, I would say at least like 4 or 5 days a week as like a 10-year-old, which I think is
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah. That was me too.
Yeah.
I did the competition, the festival circuit. It was more, dance festival circuit from a very young age up until about 14, 15, and then went to stage school in London. So yeah, it's a very interesting time. Could you explain what you feel, or maybe what you felt like the main differences are between, it's a big question, like an unanswerable question in a way, but just that when you said that there was such a difference between Japan and then Ohio, or where you were in Japan, and then Ohio and then Vancouver, I'm interested in your perspective on that because of your interest in like dance and environment and landscape and
Hmm.
maybe some of your film work too. But could you kind of sum up what you think those differences are?
Yeah,
um
and this is really my own personal
yeah, yeah, of
yeah,
course. Yeah,
perspective on it.
yeah.
But I think dancing in Japan, for me, I felt like it was a little bit more disciplined in a way that everybody kind of followed what like the teacher was doing, or I don't know. I personally, I when I'm dancing in Japan, or when I used to dance in Japan, I felt like I needed to do the right thing.
Yes. One
And
way.
in a way, and I think that also really stems into what's expected culturally as well. But
Mhm.
in Japan, I think the culture is more collective based, so everybody's like together as a group, and within your group you kind of want to have like share similar ideas and values, and you don't really want to kind of stir up the pot.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
That's just my personal intake on it, and
Yeah.
it's a beautiful culture on its own. I think Ohio was like the complete opposite of it. It was you do you, be unique, don't follow everybody else, but follow your passion and what you believe in.
Hmm.
And at sometimes I did miss that like disciplinary part, where I
Yeah.
felt like sometimes it's chaotic, and I also didn't know what I was doing as a dancer. And relocating to Vancouver, I feel like it's a combination of both. Just
Nice.
because I think geographically, Vancouver's very close to, I mean, we still have the big ocean between us, but it's closer to the Asias. And I think it's like a more like mixed culture
Yeah.
city. So that's really why I like Vancouver. I feel like I have my feet in both cultures, and I
Absolutely.
don't feel foreign in either of them.
I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I chose to be in Vancouver.
Great. And I think that that idea of the one way or the one body, maybe in the there's one technique, or there's a kind of you're all learning a particular technique, and then you're all accessing kind of a information that is not necessarily coming from the person, but a person's relationship to that other thing. I feel
Mhm.
is maybe sometimes how we look at certain dance techniques, and then others definitely are more somatic and come from each person individually. So I think it's nice to have both into
Yes,
being in
yes,
cultures where both are
absolutely.
respected and appreciated. I think that's great. So when did you know, or when did you decide that dance was your professional calling? Because it sounds like you could have gone in many directions. Like as a child, like you're reading and you're, being interested in, being busy alone, even as a child, or still
Mhm.
even. Maybe that's where your media stuff comes in too, your interest in dance and media combined, but particularly dance. Do you feel like it was just an organic development, or did you make a decision to follow it?
I think it was organic.
Yeah.
So in junior high school and high school, I was in Japan, and I think it's harder to pursue a dance career in Japan than it is to pursue it here. Just also my also personal opinion.
Yeah.
But because of that, I never really thought I was going to keep dancing in Japan. In high school, I actually went to a high school that had a very strong modern dance competitive team where we were in the nationals, and we've always been trying to get like the number one award, which is the equivalent to first place in the nationals.
Mm-hmm.
So in high school, I think I was dancing for like at least, I would say like 5 hours before and after school on weekdays. And then on weekends, it was like all day. And
Yeah.
I specifically remember we only had like 5 days of summer break.
Well,
And every other day it was just practice, practice, practice. But
mm,
even being that deep into dance, I feel like not too many people actually went to pursue a professional dance career just because how things are structured in Japan.
mm,
But I did go to university to do dance. And that's where I met my mentor. Her name is Naoko Murakoshi.
ah,
And she used to be a dancer at Toronto Dance Theatre in
mm,
Toronto.
yeah,
And she, after dancing for a couple of years, she was on faculty at York University. So
great.
she was kind of the person who was like, hey, Tomoyo, I know you're not really interested in pursuing dance as a career, but she was like, I think you have potential. Why don't you further it just a little bit more and see what happens?
You just mentioned, and for the listeners, I think this might be an important moment because that lady who was your mentor, could you say her name again for me?
Yes, her name is Naoko Murakoshi.
So Naoko actually noticed the potential in you, but you say she didn't think that you wanted to pursue dance full time, and this leads back to, don't you have a degree also in health science? Or
Yes, so
yeah,
that's in Japan. In some universities, dance is under like arts, and in
mm-hmm,
some universities, it's actually under physical education.
mm-hmm,
And the university I went to, dance was under physical education. So that's why I have this science health
great.
degree.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that.
Mhm.
That's wonderful. Okay. So this was in Japan then that
This was
you
in Japan.
yeah, great. So
Yes.
yeah,
And
continue your story if you will.
yeah, initially, when she told me to pursue it, I was like, I think I'm just going to get a job in Japan. I really thought I was going to be a translator or something to kind of
Mm,
use my language abilities. But
mm,
she was like, no, 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 just do it for like a year at least, see what happens. And so for me, it was kind of that push that she gave me.
mm,
And her friend from TDT was also doing the MFA studies at SFU back then.
mhm,
And so Naoko knew about the program, and she knew that I was also interested in not just dance, but like theater and musical theater.
mhm.
So, because of the nature of the multidisciplinary approach at SFU, Naoko was like,
Yeah.
just try, just go.
Excellent. So
So,
good.
really, I feel like it was the people around me who kind of pushed and supported me into going into this direction. And I can't really thank them enough for doing that because otherwise, I don't know where I would be now.
Hmm.
But
Well, that's good because now we get to thank them too. So that's
yes,
great.
yes.
So, yeah, really, really lovely. So, key events then in your life and work, I suppose, changing, kind of where you're living, like moving countries is a big thing. And the people that you've mentioned so far playing such a role in your life, like guiding you. Would you say, are there other highlights? Like, would you say that the MFA was a highlight, or is it because I found on the MFA that while it was wonderful for me and I moved to Vancouver for it and I really enjoyed it, the biggest thing for me is that I made seriously lifelong friends. Who, 25 years later, something like that, maybe not that long, and give myself a break, but a long time. It's definitely, we've all moved off to different places. We all came here and met here, and then most have gone off, and I sometimes go off and come back, and we're still very, very much a group. So the people I collaborated with at that time really were impactful on my life and choices following that. I feel like it was kind of meant to be like serendipitous, thing that we all arrived in Vancouver at the same time. I know you've met some of your collaborators through that program as well. So maybe you'd like to talk a little bit about some of those collaborations and maybe even your MFA graduating project or something, just to give us a little bit of background on your work.
Yeah, of course. I really connected well with my MFA colleagues. I think the biggest part was because most people came from outside of Canada. Our cohort was outside of Canada, and so everybody brought their own unique perspectives of art. And of course, everybody pursues different disciplines. So not only that, but there was another cultural aspect where I feel like it's really rare to be able to collaborate with artists from all around the world. And before that, I always felt like I was the odd one out everywhere. Like being in Japan, I felt like I wasn't fully identifying with the people in Japan just because of my upbringing in the States. And obviously in the States, although people were very generous and open into accepting me, I always felt like, well, I'm not American, I'm Japanese. And I felt like the MFA space was like the first place where it was okay to be myself because everybody else also came from different walks of life and we all accepted that. So that was, I think, my biggest eye-opening thing for me in the MFA program.
Great.
And in the MFA program, I think I really like using gestures in my movement. And so I was able to talk about like different types of gestures from around the world. I think my closest friend, she was from China, and her name is Xinwei Liu. Right now, she's actually in the UK. She's doing her PhD.
Great.
So she's not in Canada anymore, but I think we talked a lot about differences in China and Japan and similarities that stem from our culture. So yeah.
When you started to create work, your MFA project, I think you also then recreated outside of your MFA project, did you not, as a presentation?
I think
presentation.
We went to, I think like we shared it in maybe two different, not venues, but like festivals. And the MFA project, I think I was interested in language and gesture and how language change how people execute like gestural movement.
Can I just say, I wish the listeners could actually see you right now because so I'm just going to suggest that as you listen to Tomoyo for the next section, just move your hands a little bit and just circle your fingertips and your wrists and just rotate them. Palms facing each other, fingers individually wiggling, and then just rotate your wrists as you do it. And then then that will help as do that as she's talking. Okay, off you go.
Yeah. And I guess right now I still have that research question hasn't really like left me. I also realized that I use different types of gestures when I speak different languages. And that's, I think, my biggest interest currently on how language influence your body movement and like, rhythm and tempo as well. I feel like when I'm speaking in Japanese, my movements are a little bit more slower and like more flowy versus English is a little bit more like fast and
punctuated.
Yeah.
Maybe, or like short. It's interesting, isn't it? The kind of emphatic gesture. That's what happens when we gesture, when we speak, we're kind of trying to support the speech. But when we try to do it, when you try to do those gestures and you're not in a conversation, I find it quite difficult.
Like it is.
Yeah. They just kind of seem to be in the air. Like they don't have so I love that as a research area and as a kind of, something that is behind your work in general, I think is a lovely way to kind of go through as an artist. Like whatever the research question, you have these other things that you are exploring individually on all levels. So I would like to talk a little bit about the project that you did during COVID and the film project actually in the house, which is on your website.
Yes.
You do have a link to it on your website, so people can see that at tomoyoyamada.com. Is that correct? Your
Yes.
website? Yeah.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about that project?
Yeah. This project, it was more of like an experiment rather than a project, but it was just a response to COVID where all of a sudden everybody was just stuck in their house and we couldn't do anything. And so I wanted to make a piece about that, but I didn't know really how to approach it. Also, because we still had like isolation rules where we can't really be in the same like space. And so we were like, okay,
Social distance.
yeah. So we were like, how are we supposed to make how do we create while we still have to social distance? And my MFA project, we had to like spread really apart. Everybody was at least like 5 meters away from each other. And it was so hard to create because it's not just that, but if somebody used a specific part of the Marley floor, nobody else could use that section. And yes, of course, like it's because of COVID, but as a choreographer, I found that really hard. And we were looking at, okay, how can we safely create work without having to distance like 5-10 meters apart? And so we were like, why don't we just like put everybody in their own small boxes? And then if they wear a mask and if they only touch their box, we were like, is this a little bit safer than creating a normal work? So that's where the box idea came from. And then we just kind of changed it into a house looking structure.
So it's like a doll's house with dolls that are too big inside them, outside on a beach with the whole environment behind. So all of those layers become really quite playful, and also such a comment on being outdoors but still the social distance, and then being too big for the space that you're in, and all of those things. And then also there's the kind of ricketiness of the house itself that was built, that was just like, I thought that was just so wonderful, like playful and just kind of imaginative. So that was kind of exciting.
Oh, thank you.
Did you feel like it was quite serious to make because of all
No.
of the protocols? No, good, okay.
This one, the film, it was just like, let's just have fun and play and see what we can do. Also, I think we spent most of our grant building that house, so we didn't have a lot of time either. And so it was just like trying to figure out what we can do. And hopefully we hoped that it would like become a seed for some other project in the future, which it did. That's what we're developing with the DanceLab at the Dance Center.
Great.
Yeah. So now it's become like an interdisciplinary work where we are trying to project some images onto these boxes. And it's still the theme is still kind of the same. We call it the Home Project, but it's a working title. And basically it's the research question, the big broad research question is, what is a home? And people have different perspectives on what a home is. Some people think it's like the people, some people think it's the safety or the location. For me, it's sound and language within the home, not visual, but what I hear and what I say inside my home makes it feel like my personal space. So, and other collaborators come in with different ideas of what a home is.
Do you ever feel like the studio itself is a bit of a home sometimes?
In a way, yeah, in a way.
As dancers, I feel that I have certain spaces where I go, or even on stage, which I don't do very often now, but I mean, life just feels like one big performance sometimes. But on performing on stage always felt like home for me.
Yeah,
which was kind of a nice realization at one point in my life. So I wonder if there's are you building it in the theater, or are you building it in a studio, or how is that working?
Yes, right now we're building it in a studio, and we will have a showing of that in the Dance Center space at the end of March.
End of March, yeah, great.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, look forward to that. And it will be quite different than creating it or experiencing it indoors, I would think.
Yes, yes. We also do have a film component of that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Oh,
yeah,
of
of
the
this,
previous version.
oh, not the previous one, actually, the one that we're building right now.
Okay.
We're going to
Yeah.
have an in-person showing and then also a
Yeah.
film aspect of it.
Oh, great.
But
Yeah,
yes,
that's
it
good.
feels very different. It's also much more longer, and we have way more time to kind of develop and structure everything. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
suppose kind of introduce the ideas and kind of unravel them, and the stories, so to speak.
Mhm.
Not necessarily that it's fiction like that, but so the media work that you do, is it mainly in collaboration, or do you create your own? Do you create the films? Do you work with collaborators?
I work with collaborators.
Yeah.
I would love to do my own like film and edit on my own, but I feel like I don't have the technical skills nor like the artistic skills yet to do it myself.
Yeah, and I think that it takes a lot. I think it's a shift of mindset, and to trust that, and then
Hmm.
to find a way for it's just it feels for me it feels a bit stuttery right now in my learning and developing those skills. But I think it's fabulous, and it's nice to have an eye for it, or
Yes.
to kind of have that juxtaposition of that media and landscape, and then the expert, like you say, the gestures and the emphatic behavior and all of that inside it. I think that's really great. So you're working on that project. Are you working on, do you have other things? Like I noticed that you also are represented by a talent agency, and I wondered if you do some commercial work, or if that's something that is just kind of in the background for you, or would you, and a couple of other things. You also work with the, is it Klala Dance Project? Am I saying that
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
So there's this project that you're doing for the DanceLab, but I feel like with your representation and then that project, I wonder if there's something you'd like to talk about in either of those two.
Yeah, I can actually talk about both.
Great.
I think as a kid, I've been doing musical theater and I've always been interested in the theater. After graduating from my university in Japan, I sometimes performed in musical theater and like operettas.
Hmm.
And also, I was an assistant for a as I was an assistant choreographer for a play, for a theater play. So that's where kind of my interdisciplinary interests came from.
Mm.
And
Do you sing?
I sing as like an ensemble. I can never sing as like a solo.
Hmm.
I've only been
Yeah.
trained to. I entered musical theater with my dance background, so if it
Yeah.
was like a big ensemble piece, then I would be asked to sing. But I can never belt out like a big solo piece. I don't have the vocal ability to do that,
Hmm.
unfortunately. But I've always been interested in the film industry. And I was actually last year, I was not doing dance at all. I was a part of a show that was being filmed here. And I started as a background performer and then got booted up, not to a cast, but like somewhere in between background and
It's like a special,
like
it's
special
for a special,
ability
yeah, yeah.
thing. And I was also a translator on set. So
Ah,
if I was not called in as like that background performer, I was on set translating for the cast and the crew. But that's the reason why, because of that role that I had, I was really fortunate to get an agent, and now I've started auditioning for like other works as well.
oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of like, that's a very special way of entering into getting an agency. I mean, like, there's another tip from Tomoyo.
Yeah, and like really, I think the big keyword for myself is just connection.
Mm,
Because the reason why I got the agency was I also work at a place called Arts Umbrella.
yeah, we will all know Arts Umbrella. Such a,
Yes, yes, Arts Umbrella. And I work in both dance and theater departments. And so the reason why I was able to get an agency was I connected with one of the theater faculty, and
mm,
she just reached out to her own agent and was like,
mm-hmm.
"Here's a friend of mine. Are you willing to take
Great.
her?" Yeah.
Yeah, nice. That's lovely.
I
Mm.
think performance art is really all about connection with the people you have.
Yeah, the networks and integrity of the connections that you make, I think is really key.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. Okay, so could you talk a little bit about Klala Dance
Yeah.
Project?
Yeah, of course. Koala Dance Project. I actually founded it in Japan with a friend of mine.
Mm,
Her name is Chihiro Noguto, and she also graduated from the TDT School of Dance.
mm.
And we collaborated together. We had a performance in New York at the Reverve Dance Festival as Klala. But then, following my relocation, we kind of stopped working together. And then here in Vancouver, I was able to collaborate with another dance artist, Charlotte Telferwan, and Anna Daria Vieru. They were
Mm.
my like key collaborators with as Klala. Not collaborators. I think we rerun the collective together.
Yeah, you're like co-directors, really, aren't you?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And just recently we were also able to invite another person in. His name is Sam Mason, and he's been creating most of our film work. He's a
Mm.
filmmaker.
Oh, great.
So yeah, we worked collectively, and we're also a project-based collective. So the four of us will mostly be working together, but we reach out to other artists to collaborate for different projects. So we also get to experience working with other people as well.
Yeah, that's great. In the film as well,
Mm-hmm.
you have performers that you've brought in for that project, and that's the way I work with Restless Productions that I run. More project based too, and it's a wonderful way of kind of working with different people and also building up your kind of artistic relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, in New York, your performance it was 2016, wasn't it? It was quite a while ago now.
It was 2016. I think we also did it in 2014. We went there twice.
Mm.
The first time we went was through Naoko's connection.
Yeah.
And it was a bigger piece that we brought. It was based on my my imagination of what the world after death looks like from like a
Mm.
Buddhism perspective.
Yeah.
And then the second time it was with a Chihiro with Klala. And I think that was the first time I ever interacted with artists from outside of Japan since my like as an adult.
Yeah, and as an artist, as
Yes,
opposed to a dance, yeah,
yes.
dancer in training or something. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And
Great.
yeah, I think that's where I kind of saw everybody working professionally as an artist.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, this is a new world that I never really thought I'd be in. But at that point, I still didn't know if I wanted to pursue my career as a dancer.
Yeah,
But I think it was just like watching everybody do what they're doing, kind of, I guess, like unconsciously planted ideas in my head. And then ultimately it was like that push and support from other people that, yeah, helped me get into this direction.
yeah. I feel like this is another moment where the gestures,
Yes, yes.
your gestures of like almost like embroidering, if you can imagine, just kind of embroidering the space around her and then pushing it along, which is really, yeah, it's really beautiful. It really helps. Okay, that's wonderful. So, how long have you been in Vancouver then?
I think this September, I think I'm in my 6th year now living in Vancouver.
Oh, that's great. And
Yeah.
you intend to stay?
I hope so. Yes, I hope so.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it seems like you're kind of nice and busy and productive with them. Do you teach at Arts Umbrella then? So do you have a kind of very rounded kind of career that way, like teaching, creating? Do you perform for other people, like those kinds of things? Would you like to talk a little bit about how that, like, not necessarily what a day looks like, but what a year might look like for you, like all of the different things that you do?
Yeah, I feel like in terms of career wise, half of my career I teach, and I teach smaller kids.
Young, what ages?
I think the youngest is age 5,
Yeah.
and it's like creative dance classes, and it
Mhm.
just brings me back to the foundation of dance and why we even start dancing in the first place.
Hmm. You have such a wonderful story with that as well, right?
Yeah,
Your parents instilled in you the kind of like, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I guess I see like a little part of myself in all these little kids, and
Hmm.
it's just they just have so much potential, and it's
Hmm.
really
Beautiful. Yeah, I think that's lovely. So there's the teaching at Arts
yes,
Umbrella, and then
teaching.
obviously there's, yeah.
And then I think the other half is mostly doing my own project.
Yeah.
I haven't really been dancing in other people's works. I've been dramaturging for a couple of artists, Japanese
Nice.
Canadian artists' works, and I'm
Mm.
really thankful and happy to be a part of the Japanese Canadian community here and for trusting me to be like a dramaturg for their works. But I
Mm.
think it's mostly teaching and doing my own projects is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's really lovely. And you dance in your own works, do you?
Um, Not recently. I haven't been.
No.
I used to do that when I was
Mm.
like in my early 20s,
Mm.
and I find it really, really hard to choreograph and dance in your own work.
And I found this same thing because I moved from dancing to choreographing, solely choreographing. I mean, I still dance in rehearsals and still dance things out, if you like, and I
Hmm.
still dance a lot, but and teach. But I found that I was really pulled to choreography and to that and to thinking about dance and being with dance from that perspective, and that's I'm very happy and kind of grateful for that in my life. And I think there is something quite, I'm glad to have let go of the performing side
Hmm.
in a way, but I don't think about it very often. And maybe you don't either. Like, I just realize I just realize I'm not in it or I'm not, performing it. And it just feels better for me to be kind of not really on the other side, but with the work in that other way. I don't
Hmm.
feel like it's one side or the other anymore, but I feel like I can be with the work more as a choreographer.
Yeah,
I
I
feel like.
feel something really similar too. Also, when I include myself in the work, it's really hard to see everything from the outside. It's really hard to remove yourself in the work and then see everything, how everything balances out.
Yeah.
So,
And also the sense of the work is then you understand the work. I think you understand the work in a different way if
mhm.
it's through so that's useful. It's extremely useful, and that insight is really valuable. But I think there's something about, like you say, that not just balance, but the sense of the whole
Mhm.
that I have questions about all the time, and I can only ask those questions if I'm from that on
Yes.
that side, like from that perspective. So yeah, we have that in common. So what's coming up for you? We have this showing in March.
Yes, we have the showing in March, and then I think in 2023 we're going to start developing a new project. It's not necessarily new. It's based on a performative poem that I've been working on for like the past 2, 3 years. It's my experience meeting a U.S. veteran
Mm-hmm.
and coming from a military family from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
I had this very I had this very intense hug with this veteran. I think that was like 5 years ago, and ever since, I've been wanting to kind of dive deeper into what happened between Japan and the States and what people still carry and how like intergenerational trauma carries through different bodies. That's kind of my main interest now, I think, for our next upcoming project. But it's this project, I've been thinking about it for like 5 years, and it's such a like an emotionally heavy topic.
Yeah.
And so I've been hesitating to fully take on the creation of this work, but I think I'm ready now.
I would like to just kind of support you in that decision to feel ready to go and address the intensity of it, but partly because of something you say in describing it when you're in your kind of concern in your research for that, and you say that the aim of the project is to examine the potency of witness and the collective healing realized through the shared intimacy of an interdisciplinary dance performance. And I think there's something just really genuinely beautiful about that, the potency of witnessing and putting yourself in that position. I mean, we as choreographers, sometimes that's an incredible experience, right? Of witnessing your dancers or witnessing a moment. You can only experience the potency as a witness.
Hmm.
There's that element. And then there's that idea of being in this shared intimate environment that doesn't always feel rigorous and intense because there's a joy that's inside it that actually by being in it, there's a joy inside it that is actually the strongest part. So the shared intimacy then from the witness seems intense, but when you're in it, feels joyous, so there's something about those two things. One of the things that I'm saying, please, start this work and kind of pursue this, is that you say it will create an opportunity for people to think about these topics. And I think, as artists, we forget sometimes that we can do that. We can help people think about these things in a different way. Like you were saying with language and gesture, we can help them think about those things through how their bodies feel, and so they get to experience memories of these kinds of occasions as opposed to being told how to feel or, forcing a situation on them. I think that's really lovely. I think there's a lot in there
Yeah.
and a lot
Yes.
around your language and gesture as well. A lot.
Yeah, I think this is called the Hug Project. It's still a working title too. I think this was the first project that I was like, oh, I will probably never get an answer from creating this project, but I can, it's more of an offering than something than like my perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's my collaborators for this is also I have my Chinese friend Xinwei also somehow on this project. And so I really want to create people from different ethnic groups and different cultures in this, because yes, from my experience, it's between my Japanese heritage and the US, but it's not just that. I think what happened historically and what the wounds that people still carry is all around the world. And yeah, I don't really know how this piece is going to pan out, but I'm hoping that it just opens conversations into how we heal as a community.
And what we're healing, why we need to heal. The situations that require us to think about healing, which means drawing our attention to the trauma, in a sense. I think for me, the interesting thing is it's kind of around this, we start from what we know, or we can only really start from our perspective, right? That's, and I don't want to say safe, but that's the way that we can stay authentic and true to the project that we're working on, with the hope and with the anticipation that it will reach out to people and will expand because other people will find other reasons for engaging in it. So yes. I think that's what this offers. I think that's what, because in a hug as well, just in a hug is there's a resolve, right? When somebody hugs you, you don't need to know the reasons why the hug is important, but the hug itself is gives you a kind of resolve or a kind of closure, a temporary split second closure. Like it's a full act, it's a full embodied act. And I think that's a beautiful thing to research and pursue.
No, thank you. Thank you
on
so
all
much.
its scales. Yeah, wonderful. Great. So I look forward to hearing more about that, maybe toward the end of 2023, maybe into 2024, who knows?
Yeah.
But for this, I'd just like to say thank you so much for talking with me, as just a reminder that you will be having a showing at the Dance Centre at the end of March of 2023.
Yes.
We're actually talking in 2022, but
oh my God,
don't tell anyone. I know time is just flowing by like a river. Yeah, so there will be information on the Dance Centre website, obviously. Yeah, and thank you so much for talking with me today. It was a real pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. I look forward to seeing your work later in 2023.
Oh, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. We would love for you to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, as this will help other listeners find us and help us to grow our dance audience. We'll be back next month. In the meantime, you can follow us on Facebook at The Dance Centre, Twitter at Dance Centre, and Instagram at The Dance Centre BC. And if you'd like to support our work, please consider making a donation. Just go to our website at thedancecentre.ca, where you'll find extensive information about our upcoming programs and events. The music for the Dance Centre podcast was composed by James B. Maxwell. Always a pleasure to connect with you through dance. Until next time.